So welcome children once again. Now today in this video we are going to discuss about functions in Java. So children, as you all know that we must know where these functions are present. So if you are talking about Java children, we have packages in Java. So we have packages in Java, and children, in these packages we have classes. So we have already studied about classes, packages, and within the classes we have functions which are available to us. And children, if we talk about these functions are the members of the class, and classes are present in packages. So we can say that functions exist in a class, and children, these functions are the executable part of the program. And when we talk about these functions children, we have functions and they are the executable part of the program, as I said, and these contain statements to create objects, work on objects, and other executable statements. So children, when we are talking about these functions are available to us in two forms. First is the library functions. So functions, we can say that these functions which we also called as methods. So functions can also be called as methods. We have classified these functions into two forms, and one is the library functions, and the other is the user defined function, functions. So I am classifying these functions into two parts, that is a library function and a user defined functions. And children, as I told you that these functions are available to us in different classes, and these classes are present in package. So to reach to this function, we must have access to the package, we must have access to the class, and then only we can access these functions. Now children, when we are talking about functions which are also called as methods, I am saying that functions are the parts of the class. They are present within a class, and they are the executable part of the program, and they contain statements to create objects, work on objects, and other executable programs. And children, I can even say that functions are sub-programs which are ready-made short programs which are available to us or which we make for our use. When you write a Java program and you write public static void main or public void main, this main is again a function which you write within a class. So children, whenever you want to execute a program in Java, you must need these functions. So children, as these functions are used by almost everyone when you are using Java programming or when you are doing Java programming, some of the functions are there which are needed by everyone. So the Java package is having some functions which are there, which are stored for us, and they are performing some specific task, and they are available to us in different packages. So these functions we call as library functions, which are already available to us in a Java program or in a Java compiler, and we can use those Java library functions, and they are called as library function. They are available to us in different packages, and you also make your own functions when you write your own program. They are called as the user defined function. So functions are of two types: library functions, which are already given to us in different classes, which are present in different packages. And I say that package is a collection of classes, related classes, and class is a logical placeholder containing these functions and objects. And children, I am talking about this function or method. This is the executable part of the program, which is the topic I am going to do today. And children, these functions, I have divided my functions into two types: library functions and user defined functions. Now children, I also define my functions into another category as returnable functions and non-returnable functions. So we have some functions which return some value. When we execute those functions, they return some value. And there are some functions which do not return some value, but they do some task for us. So they are called as non-returnable functions. So we have even functions of two types: returnable functions and non-returnable functions. And different type of functions we are also going to study in detail when we be studying this chapter, this topic in detail. So children, today I am going to study about the library package, and when we are talking about our ICSE exams, we get at least one question in the library function, and we even get questions in the user defined function. So the first program in section A which we get in section B which we get in Java programming is on user defined function only, which we have seen in the last few years, and we even get some programs in the library function. So children, today we are going to study about the library function. So children, when I am talking about the library functions I am saying that they are the functions which are available to us, ready-made functions which are available to us. And children, these functions we are dividing again into different parts, and they are called as mathematical functions. Mathematical functions. I have classified these functions into 4 types. They are mathematical functions. Mathematical functions mean, children, that they are going to perform the mathematical task and they are going to work on numeric data. Then the second type of function which we have is the character functions. Character functions. And then we have the string functions. String functions. And lastly we have the string buffer. String buffer functions. These are the functions which are coming under the head of library functions. And children, when we are talking about these functions which are library functions, there we even have some more functions under library functions, like the scanner class. Then under the scanner class we have different function, next line, next int, next double, next float. They also come under the library function. Then functions like print, println, they also come under the library function. But this is the topic where I am going to teach you about all these mathematical functions, character functions, string buffer function. And children, if you collectively study these functions, there are more than 60 functions which you have to study here. So what I have done is I have divided my functions over here into 4 parts so that we may be able to follow them. Now children, all these functions, the mathematical function, the character and the string function, they are returnable function. That means they are going to return some value for us. And the string buffer function is a non-returnable function which we are going to study later. And children, today in this functions which we are studying under the head of library function, the first function I am going to study or I am going to teach you, we have different functions under the mathematical functions, and they are available to us in a package called java.lang. So all these functions which I am talking about is available to us in a package called java.lang.asterisk. So this is the package where all these functions are available, and this mathematical function is available to us in a class under package java.lang as maths. Character function is available to us in the class character, and string is available to us in a class string. In the same way, string buffer functions are available to us in a class called string buffer. So children, the first function which I am going to teach you over here is pow. This is the first function under the category of mathematical function. And when I am talking about this function, mathematical function, we are going to write its syntax. So its syntax will be double v is a variable, and we write it like this: math, this is the class which I am writing, and I write pow x comma y. So this is how we write this function. So this function is going to calculate a value which is x raised to the power of y. So this function is calculating me a value of x raised to the power of y. So if you want to calculate this value x raised to the power of y, then we use this math.pow function. So children, one more important thing is that this function is returning us a value, and that value returned is of type double. I have already done this functions in the previous video, mathematical functions I have already done, so we'll just do the revision of this. And so children, I say that pow is a mathematical function which is calculating the value of x raised to the power of y, and this function is returning me a double value. So this function returns a double value. Now the children, the next function is sqrt. sqrt. And to write this function, we write double v is equal to math dot sqrt, say x. X is any value. So children, here when we are talking about math.sqrt, this function is returning us the square root of value x. So we say that sqrt function is returning us the square root of its argument. This is also called as an argument x. And children, this function also returns a double value. But one more thing which we have to see here is that this function only returns the square root of a positive number. It does not return the square root of a negative number. If the value of x is negative, then it gives us a value nan. Nan means not a number. So you cannot find out the square root of a negative number. So here you have to see that it is finding out. So under mathematical function, the first function we have studied is pow. The next is sqrt. The third function which I am teaching you is cbrt. This function is recently added in the syllabus. It was not there previously. And this function is similar to square root, but it is giving us the cube root of its argument. So it is also returning us a double value. So double v is equal to math dot cbrt x. So this function is going to return me the cube root. So this function is going to give us the cube root of its argument x, and it is going to return us a double value. So children, we have studied these three functions, pow, sqrt and cbrt. So I hope these functions are clear, and children, in the exam, in the board exam, you are going to get some questions where it is going to give you questions on these functions, and it is asking you the outputs, and these questions even come in section A, which is the compulsory part of the paper. So children, will continue with the other functions. The next function which we have to study, I hope this classification or this hierarchy you have followed. Now children, the next function which we have to study is the ABS function. So we are going to study the ABS function next. I hope children you have followed these functions. The pow function is returning me a value which is the power of its two arguments, and the next function which is there is the sqrt, and then the cbrt function. So children, here now we are into the next function, that is ABS. And children, this ABS function is written like this: maths dot ABS x. Now children, if you see, I have not written any data type over here, and the main reason for not writing the ABS the return type is because I'll just let you know, this function is returning as the absolute value of its argument x. Now the absolute value of a number is the number itself without any positive or negative sign. And children, the value returned by the function, by this function, is similar to the value, to the data type of this argument. So the data type it is going to return will be similar to its argument. Say for example, I'll just give you few examples. Math.abs, if I write -5, then this function is going to return me a value 5. So what it has done is it has removed the negative sign. And children, if the value would have been abs, math.abs 5.5, say minus, then also this function would have returned me 5.5 and the minus sign would have been removed. Even if there is a positive sign present before a number, then it is going to remove that positive sign. So ABS means that it is returning as the absolute value of the number, and the absolute value of a number is the number itself without any positive or negative sign. Now children, the value returned by this function is the data type returned by this function is similar to the data type of its argument. I hope this function is clear to you. Now the next function which we have to study is max. So this is written like this: v is equal to math dot max say x comma y. Now children, two numbers are given x and y. This function is returning the maximum value out of these two numbers. The number which is bigger will be returned by this function. Say for example, if the values are max 14 and 2, the value returned will be 14. If the value is max 5.3 and 7.5, then the value returned is 7.5. Here also the data type of this function is similar to the data type of its argument. So whichever value is larger, that value will be returned. Now children, you have to be very careful in negative values. So if I say I have a negative values like this, max say minus 10 and minus 5. Now children, in this, which is the higher value? The higher value is minus 5. So that value will get returned. So it is returning us the higher value out of these two values. And it works only on two arguments. You cannot use more than two arguments over here. And the other function related to it is min. This is opposite to it. This function is returning the minimum value out of its two arguments, x and y. So if the value is math dot min say 10 comma 5, it is going to return a value 5. And other examples you can note down like this only. So children, max is returning the maximum value out of its two arguments, x and y, and math.min is returning the minimum value or the lowest value out of these two values, x and y. The data type of the function of the value returned by this function is similar to the data type of its argument. So children, I hope these two functions are clear to you. Now the next function which we have to study is rent. So next function is rent, R-I-N-T, rent. And children, the value of rent is in double, and double v is equal to math dot rent say x. Now children, this function is going to round off its argument to the nearest whole number. So this function is going to round out of its argument to the nearest whole number. Say for example, math.rent, if the value is 5.7, it will give you the value 6.0. And if the value is math.rent 5.3, then the value will be 5.0. So this function is rounding off its argument to the nearest integer, to the nearest decimal whole number. Now children, the similar function over here, we again have another function called round. This function is also doing the same task. So it is also rounding off the value to the nearest decimal whole number. So both these functions are performing the same task. This function also rounds off its argument to the nearest decimal integer. Now children, the next function related to it is floor. So we have the next function called floor, and related to it we have another function called ceil. Now children, floor, when you are looking into a room, the flooring is the lower part and the ceiling is the topmost part. So it is related to that only. So if I write double v is equal to math dot floor x, so it is going to give me a value. It is going to return a value like this. Say if I have a value 7.8, it is going to give me a value 7.0. So what it has done is, it has reduced my value, and say if my value is math.floor say 7.0, it will give me the value 7.0. Even if my value is maths.floor 7.2, then also it will give me a value 7.0. So children, what it has done is, it has, if we say that maths.floor return us a value which is either equal to or less than its argument. So maths.floor gives us a value which is equal to or less than its argument, and this function returns a double value. So children, I hope this function is clear to you. So this function is returning us a value which is equal to its argument or less than its argument, but it is giving us a decimal whole number value. So this function is returning us a decimal whole number value which is equal to or less than its argument, and it returns a double value. Then the next function, children, over here is ceil. This is just opposite to floor, and we write it like this: double V is equal to math dot ceil. Say x. Say if I have a value like this, math dot ceil, my value is 7.8. It is going to give me a value 8.0. Say if my value is 7.0, it is going to give me a value 7.0. So here we say that this function is returning us a decimal whole number value which is equal to or greater than its argument. This value is greater than its argument, this value is equal, but it is returning us a decimal whole number value. So we say that this function is returning us a decimal whole number value which is equal to or greater than its argument, and this function returns us a double value. I hope children, math.abs is returning us a value without a positive or a negative sign. It is returning us the absolute value. Max is returning us the maximum value out of its two arguments x and y. Min, this is returning us the minimum value out of its two arguments x and y. Ring function is rounding off its argument to the nearest decimal whole number. Round function is also rounding off its argument to the nearest decimal whole number. And children, floor is giving us a value which is equal to or less than its argument, and it is returning us a double value. Ceil is returning us a value which is equal to or greater than its argument. It is also returning us a double value. I hope children this is clear. So children, the next function which we have to do is the log function, log. I hope you all are doing the logarithm. So this is the same function, children. This is returning us the natural logarithm of its argument x, math.log, say x. So this function is returning us the natural logarithm of its argument x, and it is returning us a double value. But children, here the difference is that in your log book, when you are studying your log in mathematics, you take base value as 10. But here the base value taken is x. Base value taken is x, which is equal to 2.7182818281. This is the value which is taken. So I am just changing this x to y. So I am saying that this function is returning us the natural logarithm of the value y, where the base value is taken as x. So this function is also returning us a double value. So children, you must know that the base value here is different, not similar to your mathematics, to your maths which you are following. So we say that this function is returning us the natural logarithm of the number y, where here the difference is that in place of taking the base value as 10, the base value here taken is x, which is 2.7182818281, and so on. This is the approximate value or approximate base value here. And children, the next function related to it is exp, exponent, exp. Now children, this function is just opposite to log, or it can say that it is finding out the anti-log. So we can say that this function, if I write like this, double V is equal to math dot exp x. So children, this function is returning us e raised to the power of x. So children, sorry, here it is not taken as x, the base value taken over here is e. So it is e, not x. So in natural logarithm, it is finding out the natural logarithm of the number, where the base value taken is e, which is approximately equal to this value, not x. And children, here if I find out this value mass dot exp x, it is returning us the value e raised to the power of x, where e is this value which we are talking about. So we say that exp function is returning us e raised to the power of x, and it is returning us a double value, or we can even say that this function is returning us the anti-log of the number x. So this function is returning me the anti-log of the number x. So we must know about these functions also. Now children, the next function we are talking about is a function called random. This is an important function. Now children, this function is written like this. This is the function where we don't need any argument. So it is written like this: math dot random. And children, this function is returning us a decimal fractional value between 0 and 1. Neither 0 nor 1. So it is returning us a value greater than 0.0 and less than 1.0. So it is giving us a fractional value between 0 and 1. And it is returning us a fractional value. And children, this function basically is used for guesswork. So every time you find out a value through random, you get different values and you get different fractional values. So children, this function is used in programs where guessworking is required. Say for example in computer quiz, in computer games, so these type in animations. So this function is used at those places. Now children, since this function is returning us a value which is between 0 and 1, we can even use this function by making it use in a formula to find out values between two numbers. Say if I want to find out the value between two numbers, say minimum and maximum, these are the two values, then I can use this function in another way, and that is that the second way is I can use this function double v is equal to minimum plus maximum minus minimum into mass dot random. So if I use this function in this formula, minimum and maximum are two values, say 10 and 50. I want to find out a value between 10 and 50. Then I can get this value between 10 and 50 by using, say 10 is minimum and maximum is 50. So if I use this formula and I use this formula to find out a value between two values, but the function I have used is mass dot random, and this mass dot random is returning me a value between 0 and 1. So children, if I want to, this function is going to return me a double value. Say if I want to find out an integer value between two numbers, between say 10 and 50, then the only thing I do over here is that I write int and I enclose this in a wrapper. This is explicit typecasting which I am doing. Minimum plus maximum minus minimum into mass dot random. So if I use this formula in this way, then children, I can get an integer value between these two numbers, max and min. So I can use this formula in three different ways. I can use it to find out a fractional number between 0 and 1, that is random. And this function does not require any output. This function is returning us a double value. If I want to find out any number between two values, then I can use this. And if I want to find out any integer number between two values, then I use this formula. I hope children this is clear to you all. So here log is finding out the natural logarithm of a number y, and the difference is that here the base value taken is small e, which is approximately equal to 2.718281 and not 10, and it is returning us a double value. Exp is used to find out the value e raised to the power of x, where e is this base value, so we say that it is giving us the anti-log of the number x. Random, this function is giving us a random fractional value between 0 and 1, and I can even use this function by making use in these two formulas to get a random number between two values. This is for fractional number, this is for integer number. I hope children these functions are clear to you all. Now children, we have few more functions which are there, and when we talk about those functions, we say that we have functions like the trigonometric functions which are available to us, and these trigonometric functions, you all know they are sine, cos, tan. Then we have cot, cosec, and cot. And children, we even have these functions in computers. But the only difference is, children, when we are talking about these trigonometric function, you're talking about angles. And here you are talking about angles. And when we talk about angles, you are measuring your angles in degrees. You say 30 degree, 45 degree, 90 degree. But children, angles can also be measured in radians. This is another unit. And you are working on it, maybe you don't know it. So there is another unit to measure angles, that is radian. And the similarity between degree and radian is very simple. If we talk about 360 degree, that is one complete rotation, it is equal to 2 pi radians. So 2 pi is equal to 360 degrees and 2 pi in radians. These are the similar angles. And children, pi you all know, 22 upon 7 or 3.14159. This is the approximate value. And children, when we talk about that 180 degree, it will be equal to pi. 90 degree, it will be equal to pi by 2. And when we talk about say more 45 degree, it will be pi by 4. And when we talk about 30 degree, it will be pi by 6. And when we talk about say x degree, you can find out it will be pi upon 180 into x. So you can convert these degrees into radians. Now children, you might be thinking why I am talking about these radians, because the trigonometric function which I am going to teach you now, that is the next function. I don't know the number, I don't remember, I think it is 14. So it is sine. This function is going to give me the sine of an angle x, which is measured in radians. So we don't measure the angles in degrees here, we measure the angles in radians, and you can convert your degrees into radians. So children, we use this function in this way, math, or we say double. We'll say double v is equal to math dot sine x. So this function is going to return me the sine of an angle x, which is measured in radians, and it is going to give me a double value. So sine math dot sine function returns the sine of an angle x measured in radians. It returns a double value. The next function is cos. So the same thing applies over here. Double v is equal to math dot cos x. So this function returns the cosine of an angle x measured in radians, and it returns a double value. The next function over here is tan. So this function returns the tangent of an angle x, which is measured in radians, and it returns a double value. So children, these are the three functions where we are calculating or finding out the sine of an angle x measured in radians, the cosine of an angle x measured in radians, and the tangent of an angle x measured in radians. The next function we have is a sine. It is opposite to sine. It is doing the reverse of sine, and it is giving me say math dot a sine. So a sine say x. So I say that it is giving me the angle in radians of a given sine value x. So it is doing the opposite of this. It is giving me the angle of it is giving me angles in radians of a sine value x. So it is opposite to it. The next function over here is a cos. A cos double v is equal to math dot a cos x. It is giving me the angle in radians of a given cosine value in x. So it is giving me the angle in radians of a given cos value x. And the last function which is there in this is a tan. And this function is again returning me a double value, and it is also giving me the angle in radians of a given tangent value x. So children, here we have completed the mathematical functions. We have 19 mathematical functions which we have done, and you get questions in this topic also. So the next topic which we have to start is the character function, which I will continue in the next video. And after that we have very important category of function, that is the string functions, which we have to study. I hope you have followed this. So thank you very much.